India, Ambassador Vardhan Shringla, former Foreign Secretary, India, Shri Ashok Malik, Partner and India Head, Asia Group. And to moderate this conversation, we have Dr. C. Raja Mohan, Visiting Research Professor, Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore, former journalist, and now one of the very respected thinkers on foreign policy. So actually, IMAC for India is product of the G20's New Delhi session, where Mr. Kant was country's Sherpa, and it is product of his hard work, his lot of oil which he had burnt to stay up during the nights, and the sweat he has put in. So he can give us a really good deep dive, not only how he did it and how he perceives that the IMAC would change the fortunes of India of tomorrow. Mr. Shringla was around at that time as a foreign secretary when a lot of discussions were happening. So we are sure to have really good insights. Mr. Rajamohan, mic is now yours. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's really been a long day for all of you. It really shows how much interest there is in this very, very important subject. You stayed on for this bitter end, I would say. So I hope it's been worthwhile because this is certainly going to be one of the more consequential global developments. And I think India is deeply involved in this. And you see both the participation and the interest that the government of India has shown that this is going to be something that we are going to be heavily invested in. We have three wonderful speakers. The introductions have already been made. But in the opening remarks, I just want to say just one thing, that I think the idea of corridors, connectivity has been quite central to India's foreign policy after the Cold War. As India opened up with its economic reforms, the need to connect to markets, the need to get energy resources, the need to better engage with our neighborhood, all these factors drove interest in corridors. But my sense is our attempts, despite our best efforts, the corridors to the east, across the land, or to Inner Asia through Iran and Central Asia, none of them have really taken off because I think the difficult circumstances on the ground. And unlike the Inner Asian corridor, where we tried to go through Iran and to Central Asia, we are today, the IMAC actually aligns with India's closest trading partners. The Gulf today is one of our biggest trading partners, especially the Emirates and Saudi Arabia are our top trading partners. They're also some of our biggest energy partners. And then Europe, after US and China, Europe is one of our big trading partners. So I think finally the ideas of connectivity and corridors are today connected with actual trade flows. And I think this augurs well for a long-term where we bring into synergy the diplomatic and infrastructure initiatives in tandem with the actual trade flows. So I think this is going to be one of the more successful initiatives, I suspect. I'm going to start with Amitabh Kant. Amitabh, you were there at the G20 in September 2023. You were there at the creation of this idea when it was launched at the end of the G20 summit. Now, a year and a half later, how do you see its prospects? In fact, our session is about looking to the future. So how do you see its prospects and what does it mean for India getting this thing done as quickly and as efficiently as possible?
First and foremost, I'd say that in the present context, when there's a lot of geopolitical disruption, there's a breakdown in global supply chain, there are new technologies like AI and quantum emerging, supply chains will get disrupted in a very big way. And to my mind, this is really India's moment. It's a moment which must be seized by India. And it gives you the opportunity to push for alternative trade links. What the IMEC, which was envisaged and planned, was really that it will link up India to the Middle East and then through road network to Israel, and from Israel on to Europe. And the transportation costs, the timings were to come down by about 40%, and the cost was to come down by close to about 30%. The second point I want to make is that global growth is at its lowest since the turn of the century. And if global growth has to be accelerated, and when I say global growth is necessary because you have to achieve SDG goals, without growth you can't achieve them. Vast segments of people have gone below poverty line because of COVID, so you need to accelerate the pace of growth. If there's one project which can be transformational to push global growth, it is the IMEC corridor. And the third point I want to make is that it is in the interest of India, it is in the interest of the Middle East, it's in the interest of Europe, and it's in the interest of United States. This project has all the stakeholders together, including Trump, who said that this can be a transformational project in the year to come. My view really is now that several countries have appointed their coordinators, their ambassadors, etc., for taking this project forward, particularly in Europe. We need to projectize, we need to really link down the financing. Each country needs to move forward. There are several challenges because of Iran, there is a challenge because of the Middle East crisis, there's a challenge because of Houthis in Yemen, which is the Red Sea link, which is impacting. But I think these challenges will be overcome as we go along, because we are trying to crack a totally new corridor, the eastern corridor and the northern corridor, both of which will have a huge significant logistical impact on trade in Europe. It will have a huge impact on pushing trade in the Middle East. And the last point I want to make is that for this trade corridor to become really successful and commercially viable, India needs to build up its manufacturing. The important thing is that India just contributes 4.1% to the global manufacturing. China contributes 31%. So if India needs to accelerate the pace of its manufacturing and become a very integral part of the global supply chain, because India needs to become both a beneficiary and a major supplier to the India-Middle East corridor. Without that, this corridor will not work. And if India needs to benefit, it needs to make sure that Indian manufacturing contributes 25% to India's GDP, but more than that, India's growth and prosperity is closely linked to exports, and therefore exports will have to become an integral part of our growth strategy.
Let me ask you one follow-up question. I mean, I think you were in charge of the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. I mean, I think we saw that the effort at doing across states in India, that itself was quite challenging. Given the difficulties of doing this across countries, across oceans almost, how do you see, are we prepared institutionally to deal with the challenges of doing it across country project of such great magnitude? So,
I did the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, which is now the National Industrial Corridor, the NITI, and I did the Dholera city and the Auric smart city in Maharashtra, and took the land for about 6 other cities which are presently in the process of getting developed. I think, to my mind, it was the most complex, most difficult, and the most challenging project a human being can ever do. And to my mind, IMEC will be a really, really complex project for several reasons. One is to be able to projectize it, to be able to mobilize financing, and when you do mobilization of financing, you need to de-risk projects. Some equity will have to come in from the governments, but a large amount of private sector funding will have to come in. Private funding projects will not come into these projects unless and until they are hugely de-risked on ground. And that, to my mind, will be a massive challenge because of the conflicts in Red Sea, because of Houthis, because of what is happening in Iran and what is happening in the Middle East, in Israel. But irrespective of that, I think some of these projects, especially the rail linkage, will have to be essentially a government project. And therefore, all stakeholders need to put their resources in to make this project both feasible and commercially doable on ground. It has long-term spin-off. It's a project which will require funding now, but will have benefits at the back end. These are long-term paying projects. They have this is a project which can be transformational. This is a project which will change the destiny of the countries involved. This is a project which will change the lives of citizens involved. And therefore, initial complexity will more than be compensated, 10x be compensated by the benefits which will flow in the long run.
No, Ambassador Shringla, if I may turn to you, Amitabh has talked about, the organizational and other imperatives of organizing a cross-country project. But the region that we're talking about is also one of the most volatile geopolitically, and in the last few years, we've seen both positive as well as negative trends. We've seen the Abraham Accords, the normalization between Israel and some of the Arab countries. But we've also seen post-October 2023, the return of terrorism and the conflict. But today, we see President Trump trying to once again revive some of these peace processes. In fact, last 2 days, there were talks between Iran and the US, indirect talks in Oman. So how do you look at the Middle East situation? And how do we bring regional security, regional diplomacy in line with the possibilities that Amitabh has articulated?
We're talking about an ambitious, visionary, futuristic project. And I think Prime Minister Modi referred to it almost in civilizational terms when he said it's an intergenerational project. And it seeks really to provide a corridor between 3 regions, which are among the most significant economies of the world, accounting for almost 50% of global economic activity. So when you talk about a project of that magnitude, I think there will be challenges. Mr. Amitabh Kant just referred to it as difficult and complex. And I think if you look at the fact that there are challenges, the first, as you mentioned, is the geopolitical challenge. I mean, it is a project that is going to the heart of the most volatile region in the world. You not only have Israel and the Gaza Strip, which is at war, but also you have Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran, all of which is in the mix. And that volatility continues today. And I think that is going to be one of the major challenges. The second, of course, I think is the fact that you will need to coordinate a project of this magnitude. I think there was a brief discussion, and Kapil just talked about the fact that the role of the United States itself is one that we have to review in the light of the Trump administration's policies and priorities. My own sense is that when Prime Minister went there, the discussions encompassed IMEC because the joint statement reflects that the 2 sides will work on IMEC. At the end of the day, it is a very important aspect that follows up and consolidates the Abraham Accords. That was signed during Trump 1.0. It is one of Trump's signature achievements during his first presidency. So it is, I would say, only to be expected that the Trump administration will not only follow it up, but will give it the heft that it needs. So coordination across the board and the convening power, as again Kapil mentioned, is very, very important, and you would expect the US to be on board. The third point, again, as was mentioned earlier, was what about those states that are not part of the IMEC, the corridor? Turkey is not there, Egypt is not there, Iran is not there. Iran has already criticized it publicly. Turkey is mooted an alternative corridor. Well, these are challenges that you have to take into account. The fourth, I would say, is financing. You need, obviously, to raise financing, which is substantial. We're talking about 500 billion euros, about €500 billion, which is significant from governments, from the private sector, from the public sector, from sovereign funds. So you need to have or find the financing at a difficult time when countries are actually looking inwards. The United States itself is looking to cut down its own spending. Europe is looking much more insular and focusing its budget on defense. So all around, there is a certain financial sort of constraint which has to be overcome. But the last point I want to make is that India has invested in peace. I mean, I think the Prime Minister is quite clear that, we stand for peace. And in that sense, I think we're willing to contribute to any effort that fosters peace. And IMEC is a very important part of any peace effort that has to come in the Middle East. It is not just the Abraham's Accord, but it's a fact that you create livelihoods, you create employment, you create synergies, and try to unite the entire region and bring them all together. And we have to get traction for this project from countries that are not exactly part of the route also. So I think we have an important role to play, and I think we see it very much in terms of a visionary sense that this corridor is going to be a game changer, not just for us, the Middle East and Europe, but for the whole world and the global south in particular.
See, given the challenges there, I mean, if you go back last 2 years, the Houthis and a small militant group, their capacity to disrupt the global shipping in Red Sea, which is one of the pivotal sea lanes of the world, that was not very impressive. I mean, the international community could not get its act together. Even the US, now Trump administration is talking about it differently. So what is the assurance that the world can actually overcome some of the obstacles? Because the Houthis have not been able to control now. It's not clear whether you can use so much force that small rebel groups have shown us the capacity to disrupt. So you need a broader peace effort. I mean, I think I want you to talk about how we bring in stakeholders from the whole region.
So, as I mentioned, I think it needs a sort of an approach which goes beyond just the I2U2 and the IMEC corridor. In other words, first of all, we're already part of the international north-south corridor, right, which connects through Iran, connects Central Asia, and Azerbaijan, and then Russia. So that alternative paradigm, which is basically Russia, Iran, the Central Asian states, is also part of our own calculus. How do we unite all these multimodal, corridors and pathways to economic progress and development is a very important aspect of our work ahead of us. So I think getting all of these countries to understand that this is in their interest is very important. I think coercion has its limitations. You correctly pointed out that with a group like the Houthis, you can bomb them out of existence, but whether that makes a difference to such a disparate, non-state actor is a question mark. But you need to, I think, reach out. You need to try and get their involvement and their sort of bring them in as stakeholders in this larger project and make them understand that there is an economic benefit to all countries in the region, not just those through which the corridor passes. So I think diplomacy is an important part of it. Getting countries onto this bandwagon is very, very important. Working with our partners is very, very critical. And again, I feel that if any country can contribute to that effort, it is India, given our track record of working towards peace, using dialogue and diplomacy, and the Prime Minister's own equities that he enjoys in the region. I mean, nobody can really reach out as easily to Gulf, to the Gulf kingdoms, to their rulers, to Israel, to Jordan, to Europe, and of course, far beyond that, to Egypt, to Iran. So I think we have what it takes to bring this together, and I think it will be on those lines.
Ashok, turning to you, I mean, you follow the global developments and the intersection of India's policy with the larger geopolitical dynamic. I think when you look at the finances, unlike in many other places, you have Saudis and the UAE, they have huge financial reserves. Their sovereign wealth funds are some of the biggest in the world. So does that make it easier because they have the resources to actually back this with real substance rather than we're hunting around for finances?
Thanks, Raja. A couple of points here. One, there's no question that the IMEC project is an epic project of intergenerational ambition. Having said that, we have to inject some nuance and realism into the financing and the economics of this project. I've heard people compare it to BRI. I don't think it's BRI at all. BRI is essentially a corridor that moves China's manufacturing surplus from the eastern seaboard of China or the western ends of China to markets far away without any value addition or route, and builds infrastructure or ports which have skeptical viability metrics. Now, IMEC is very, very different. IMEC actually attempts to link multiple growth centers, all of which are independent growth centers. India is a growth center, the UAE is a growth center, Saudi Arabia is a growth center with massive internal post-oil investment. Israel is a formidable economy, a small but formidable technology economy, and Europe remains a formidable economy as well. Of course, it's not growing as much as it used to, but it's still a powerful manufacturing economy. Now, in theory, linking each of these growth centers can make for something much larger and much more, something which is greater than the sum of the parts. In practice, politics intervenes. Politics intervenes between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and that remains a problem. I don't think Mr. Trump has a solution to it, though he wants it. And therefore, linking the Middle East to Europe also remains a problem, though multiple European countries in the Mediterranean, from Greece to France to Italy, are certainly interested. What is driving IMEC at the moment is the eastern part of the project, which is India to the UAE, India up to Saudi Arabia. The PM is going to Saudi Arabia this month. IMEC is going to be part of the conversation. And I would say here that, yes, Indian manufacturing and what role it could play are certainly important. Mr. Kant is absolutely right. I'll give you one example. At the beginning of this century, at the beginning of this century, India exported about $1 billion worth of goods to Saudi Arabia. In 2023, it exported $11 billion, so 10 times the amount. At the beginning of the century, the single largest item exported, 30%, was rice. In 2023, the single largest item exported was refined petroleum products. In the year 2000, beginning of the century, the largest textile category was raw cotton. Now it's finished products, ready-made garments. So as Indian manufacturing grows, in the years to come, you will have electric vehicles from India, you will have iPhones from India being sold in this part of the world. That is certainly something which we can look forward to, but beyond the Arab world, it remains a question mark at the moment.
Amitabh, I know you have to leave your other pressing engagement, but on the question, take an optimistic view. It's really India, UAE already have huge trade connections. What we're talking essentially is a cross-Arabian Peninsula linkage, which is largely internal to Saudi Arabia. So they have a stake in developing that, and then crossing across into the Mediterranean. So given that, is the problem not building actual infrastructure, but actually standards, simplifying gauges, of creating the facilitation, paperwork, so that things move across seamlessly?
So, you know, Rajas, the Saudis have already announced a substantial investment of about 20 billion into this. My view is that India, as the chief anchor of the Eastern Corridor, should look at itself as both a key driver and a beneficiary, and we should have a very clear future roadmap for this. To my mind, we should have firstly, a short-term roadmap which should emerge from the discussions here, which should be a 1 to 2 year roadmap. And that roadmap should be to launch a joint IMEC coordination forum of all the countries. You know, it'll bring in all the stakeholders, they will prioritize project selection, they will work out the investment plans, etc. So that's number one. Secondly, we should begin feasibility studies of the project because they take time. Whether they're commercially viable, whether they'll be driven by governments, whether they'll be driven by the private sector, that will emerge. And thirdly, we should pilot, to my mind, a green hydrogen project between India and UAE, and we should use this also as an opportunity to drive digital public infrastructure in this. So this should be a short-term. Then we should have a medium-term vision, which should be, to my mind, a 2 to 4 year perspective, and the medium term should really look at accelerating regulatory and custom harmonization across the corridor. That is very critical. Without that, it will not work. So it should, you know, you have to harmonize all the regulations in all these countries. Otherwise, there'll be huge challenges on ease of doing business. Secondly, we need to look at encouraging blended financing, multilateral development financing, bring that into this. And thirdly, to my mind, is very also important to expand the participation to Oman and to Egypt. They will play a critical role. At least both Oman and Egypt will be winners for India, so we need to look at that. And they can foster greater geopolitical security in the region, and therefore that's important. And the third is that we should come out with a long-term vision, and the long-term vision should ensure full-scale operationalization of IMEC corridors with integrated digital, energy, and logistics layer. We should develop a regional security framework to insulate economic cooperation from the geopolitical volatility in the region, because it's a volatile region. And we should thirdly use IMEC as a springboard to launch, basically drive both manufacturing and trade within this region in a very big way. So a short-term plan for 1 or 2 years, a medium-term plan 2 to 4 years, and a long-term plan between 5 to 8 years, so that this corridor gets cracking on the ground. But harmonization of rules, regulation, procedures, particularly standards on the customs, is very, very critical to my mind.
Please, Amitabh has to leave. Thank you, Amitabh, for actually coming and spending time with us. Take care.
Amitabh sir, just a second, please. May I request Dr. Ashwini Mahajan to come forward and acknowledge Mr. Kant's presence. Just a second, sir. Sir, photo up hai, ruk jao. Ek second. Go. Thank you, Mr. Kant. Mr. Kant is a great support for CIU, and he has helped us taking the clean tech story very forward. No, bhai, kar lo. Sir, then Ashwini ji, felicitate them.
So let me just say one
please.
We have a Prime Minister is going to Saudi Arabia next week. In way, many of the things we've discussed are going to come up, I think, in a significant way. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of diplomatic activity around it. We saw both Ashok, Amitabh, and Harsh talk about the various range of issues. And my sense is that the diplomatic momentum is picking up, but I think the tasks that need to be done, one internally in terms of what we need to do, and externally in terms of India's more active engagement with the politics and security of the Middle East, then that too becomes very, very important. And finally, I would say one of the transformative aspects of this project is we've historically thought about Europe, the Middle East, and India as 3 separate regions. I think what IMEC does is to break the artificial barriers that we mentally constructed, certainly after independence, but actually if you see historic from Alexander down the line, that the Mediterranean, the Arabian Peninsula, and India were part of a single common space. And one of the great tragedies has been we've lost that connectivity. Today, I think, even mentally redrawing that map. In fact, some people are beginning to call this something called Indo-Mediterranean region cutting across the Arabian Peninsula.
Italian Prime Minister talked about Indo-Roman.
Yeah, okay. So I think we are in an interesting phase, and let me, please join me in thanking our panel, which has kind of covered many aspects.
Thank you, Mr. C. Rajamohan. It is always a pleasure listening to you. I have grown up, reading your columns in Indian Express, and whatever little I understand of foreign policy, it is thanks to your columns. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Shringla, country's former Foreign Secretary, Mr. Ashok Malik. Some applause, please. Thank you very much.